My wife called me that Friday morning in a panic, asking me to come home immediately. I left the family business, which my father had entrusted to me and my brother, because I felt something was wrong. Beth Tate, a stay-at-home mother who had never worked outside our marriage, only reached out to me at work for significant matters, so I knew this was serious. I was concerned that something might have happened to one of our teenage daughters at school, hoping it wasn't as grave as her call suggested. Both our daughters were very athletic, so I wondered if it could be a sports injury. My daughters were my life, both growing into beautiful young women, just like their mother. We ran the largest electrical company in the state. I handled commercial projects while my brother managed residential ones. Since taking over, we had more than tripled our volume each year for the past 6 years. My mother was immensely proud of us for continuing my father's legacy. Last year, our company achieved a milestone, making $5 million net for the first time in its over 50-year history. In the 9 years since our father's passing, we had built the business into a very successful enterprise, valued at around $20 million. As the oldest, John was made president by our mother, who retained 52% of the shares. My brother and I each held 24%, a setup to ensure our mother's financial security. After my father's death, my mother insisted I manage her personal investments. I shifted her portfolio from conservative to aggressive, yielding excellent results. When I arrived home, I was shocked to find movers packing up our belongings. Beth was standing by the road next to a 2020 model car I had purchased for her. She was leaving me for good, and her daughters had already been relocated without my knowledge or permission. She had kept them out of school to avoid them witnessing our breakup. It was clear she had orchestrated this to prevent any discussion with our daughters. "I'm sorry, James, but I've fallen out of love with you and am in love with someone else," she said, handing me the divorce papers. "You don't need to know who he is because it doesn't matter now. I've already filed for divorce." She wanted our last contact as a married couple to be brief. With that, she got into her car and drove away, marking the end of our 17-year marriage. Her departure was so abrupt that I didn't even have a chance to understand our daughter's feelings about the situation. I initially thought she might have met someone online, but the timing didn't fit with her being home and our daughter's awareness. As the movers took another piece of our daughter's furniture out of the house, I realized they must know where the furniture was going. I asked the driver, who kindly shared the delivery address with me. To my shock, the address was familiar. I tipped the driver generously and asked him to lock up after finishing. I drove back to our family business, making a stop to verify the address. What I discovered shattered my life. Not only had Beth left me, but she had done so for someone I knew well. Beth had been a constant presence in my life since her early teens, always tagging along with her brother and me. Wherever we went until her early teens, the three of us were inseparable. Her brother remained a good friend but was now a dedicated Marine, applying the morals, principles, and standards he was raised with to his career. I was proud of him and had deep respect for his commitment. As we progressed through our teens, we developed different interests and grew apart due to the usual changes in life. With my father's business booming, much of my spare time was spent helping out. Sometimes I would be receiving stock for upcoming jobs. When I asked my father why he hadn't used his own name for the family business, he said, "Tate and Sons or variations have been used too much and often don't last. I want this business to endure long after I'm gone." Parrish is your mother's maiden name and gives it a sense of continuity. My older brother John, who was 3 years older than me, would take me along when delivering supplies to job sites. Because of his age, he earned a wage, whereas I didn't. I used that time to learn as much as I could. After finishing the 10th grade, I joined an apprenticeship program to earn my electrical license and continued my education online, graduating from the 12th grade before completing my apprenticeship. I also started working towards a university degree in business management. The skills and knowledge I gained helped my father expand and grow his business. Meanwhile, John worked his way up the ladder, learning every aspect of the business through hands-on experience. He also picked up some less desirable habits along the way. What set us apart was that I began bidding for and winning small commercial contracts, often bringing projects in under budget. This approach, which my father and brother knew little about, significantly contributed to our growth. Our innovative methods earned us a reputation that far exceeded our expectations. My father used to say that I was the brains of the company and John was the brawn, and it took both of us to make the business successful. At 20 years old, living on my own, my brother called me one night, too drunk to drive home from a wild private party. He didn't want to risk getting caught by the police, so I went to rescue him. After helping him into the back seat of the car, I heard a voice behind me. "James, can I get a ride home with you? My date is passed out somewhere, and if I don't get home, my dad will be furious." Beth, at 17, had become a very beautiful young woman with mesmerizing blue eyes and an irresistible smile. She had an hourglass figure that attracted attention and long blonde hair. Her presence was captivating, and I was struck by her beauty. Knowing her parents were protective and would be upset if they knew where she was, I agreed to give her a ride home. Her father, clearly concerned about his daughter being out late, was waiting when we arrived. I stopped at the edge of the road to hide my brother, then helped Beth out and walked her to her front door. Her father was ready to reprimand me for bringing her home late, but was relieved to find it was me. "Damn it, Beth. You should have told me your date was James. I wouldn't have worried." A week later, Beth visited my father's shop after work, asking me to take her to her senior prom, which was still 2 months away. I agreed to think about it and offered to drive her home. That evening, I took her out for dinner after confirming with her parents that it was okay since it was a school night. It took her most of the night to convince me of her interest, and it was another 2 weeks before I started taking her seriously. On prom night, we agreed to become exclusive. That was how it all began, and now the end of our marriage had come. About 20 minutes later, I arrived at our head office. I walked to John Tate's office, feeling both angry and determined, only to find the door closed. I asked his receptionist if my brother was in, and she said he was inside, speaking to someone on the phone and wanted privacy. I asked Mary, the receptionist, to come with me into my brother's office. "I need you to be a witness to what I have to say," I told Mary. She could see the intensity in my expression and nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Without warning, I kicked open the door to John's office, breaking it open. John looked up in surprise as we entered, abruptly ending his phone call and turning off his cell phone. In a fit of rage, I said, "You need to get this business appraised and find a way to buy my shares. You have as long as my divorce takes. Do you understand?" Mary's mouth fell open in shock. She had never seen me this angry. "What is this all about?" John asked, looking genuinely puzzled. "The movers gave me the address where they're delivering Beth's belongings. I saw my daughters leaving their new residence just as Beth pulled in," I explained. John stood silent, struggling to figure out how to handle the situation. "It wasn't intentional," John said coldly, showing no remorse. "She's just staying with me until she finds a place to live." "That's a lie," I replied. "Beth told me she was moving in with the man she's in love with. She even said she didn't need to tell me his name because it was none of my business anymore." John's face turned white, and I could see he was at a loss for words. I knew him to be someone who avoided facing uncomfortable truths. Mary looked equally stunned, realizing John's behavior was far worse than she had expected. "How long have you two been involved?" I demanded. "On those afternoons when I covered for you, was it so you could be with her? I'll probably need to get tested for STDs considering some of the people you've been with." John's face went pale and he quietly said, "I don't think this is the right time or place for us to discuss this." "There's never a right time for something like this, John," I said firmly. "You should go to the bank and start discussing how to buy out my shares or put the business up for sale. We're done as business partners and as brothers. There's got to be another option." John protested, "We can't afford to lose you. We need to talk this through when you've calmed down." In my anger, I picked up the phone on John's desk and dialed our mother, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. "Mom, I have some bad news," I said, my voice almost trembling with rage. "Today is my last day. I'm resigning from the family company effective immediately. I've told John he needs to find a way to buy out my shares as soon as possible." "What?" Mom replied, shocked. You love that business. You're the rock that has made it what it is. What has happened to make you decide this? I think you should ask John when you find him. He might be at home because his secret lover is moving in today. I hear they're getting married as soon as her divorce is finalized. He's likely with her, showing his support, I said, beginning to calm down. I suggest you drive over to his place and introduce yourself to the woman he's been bragging about. You'll be meeting her as her future mother-in-law. I hung up the phone. John's rage was palpable, but he couldn't speak. Mary, could you follow me to my office and ensure I don't take anything that belongs to the company? I want to avoid any claims that I was fired for theft, I said. John was growing increasingly angry as I made my expectations clear to the staff. Before leaving his office, I said, should I walk out backwards so you won't have a chance to betray me again, John? With what you and Beth have done, it would have been easier if you had just shot me. We walked back to my office where my receptionist was working. I said, Joe, could you please come in and witness what is about to happen? I think Mary will appreciate having a witness for this. James, what's going on? Joan asked. I've resigned because John has taken my wife and children from me, I said. I was served with divorce papers at home. The movers gave me the address where they were delivering Beth's belongings, and it turned out to be my brother's place. Both of our long-term executive assistants were in shock. They had been our steadfast support for years, and I valued them greatly. Mary said, let's list everything James takes, along with what keys he returns. We'll type it all up and make 5 copies. Joanne and I will each keep a copy for safekeeping. So if any documents disappear, we can verify what happened today. Their trust in the process showed me just how much they valued their roles. It made me wonder what other secrets my brother might be hiding. It took about an hour to get everything sorted. I called security to escort me out and verify what I was taking with me. I watched as both ladies placed the extra copies in their purses. My brother had left in a hurry without saying goodbye, likely trying to avoid the situation at his home. I later learned he arrived too late as everyone saw our top 2 executive assistants escorting me out with the security personnel. With tears in their eyes, I kissed both ladies on the cheek and thanked them for their years of support. I took a single box from the security officer's hand as I left. As soon as I was outside, everyone wanted to know what was happening. The ladies explained as best they could. After opening the trunk, I threw the box in and closed it. On my way through town, I stopped at a real estate office and listed the house. I gave the representative my wife's cell phone number and instructed her that I would leave it up to my soon-to-be ex to decide the listing price. When I got home, I found that besides the personal belongings, only the bedroom furniture of our daughters had been taken. I shut off my cell phone and read through the divorce papers. The grounds were emotional and mental cruelty, and she was asking for primary custody of our daughters, Boo and Bree, with supervised visitation for me once a month for 1 hour. Beth thought I was too strict because I didn't allow our daughters, age 13 and 15, to date without chaperones. She felt I was outdated and that my views on morals and family were too restrictive. Beth believed that my approach to raising our daughters was stifling their personal development and mirrored the way her father had treated her. She was using our differing views on parenting as a reason for the divorce. I went to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a drink, flipping through channels but finding nothing suitable to distract me. It seemed I passed out from drinking, waking up with a hangover on the living room sofa still in my business suit. After undressing, showering, and shaving, I made breakfast and went outside to do my usual Saturday chores. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I turned my cell phone back on and saw text messages from my mother, my brother, my wife, and my 2 daughters, all trying to reach me. I suspected that my daughters were in on the situation and had agreed to go with their mother. The only message I trusted was from my mother. Once I had settled down and thought things over, the real estate agent called me. Mr. Tate, your wife finally showed up this morning. She was quite upset to find that you're letting everything in the house go. I showed her comparable properties in the area, and she agreed to add $20,000 to the asking price because of the value of the furniture. Thank you for informing me, I said. I'd like it sold as soon as possible because the house holds too many memories. Just so you know, she broke down when she saw what was happening. She was shocked by your decision. I asked her what she expected. Miss Waterston, she said. She left you for your brother, and now you're selling the house. She expected you to take it as a given. She even mentioned demanding to be bought out of the family company. I responded, what choice did she leave me? Heading back to the office. The upper management team had a small celebration before calling it a night. My girls called to ask if it was okay to go with their grandparents for the weekend. I acted surprised but said they should go ahead and have fun. When I got back to my mother's, I told her about what I had done after court. She said, Ted is getting a good deal. The items you're selling in that house are worth more than what they're paying. Believe me, they know you are setting them up better than they could have imagined. Despite what Beth did, he will repay you by being meticulous with every penny. Once again, you're taking the high road. Thank you, Mom, I said. John sold the shares back to me this morning for $5 million through my personal lawyer, so I guess I'm staying on as part of the board. What motivated him to do that? He told my lawyer he had never been happy in the industry. He stayed because it was owned by the family. As soon as the divorce is over, they will be moving to Florida because he is going into property development as he has a lot of land down there that he is going to develop. I was smiling because John would never know that our business was worth over $40 million based on the current market value according to Tom's report. Using that report, we had secured $15 million, which we had spent $10 on buying the assets and contracts in the north at 10 cents on the dollar. Tom, in reviewing their assets, felt we could recoup close to $7 million after streamlining the operation by getting rid of their head office building, the 4 unneeded storage centers, and the excess vehicles on hand. It would cost a couple of million for repainting the commercial fleet and rebranding. The incentives that kept the independent contractors working for us were based on their production and quality of service. On Christmas Eve, all independent contractors received a Christmas bonus equaling 10% of the revenue they generated, tax-free. We had learned years ago that this approach improved our service to the customer, reduced complaints about workers, and increased customer satisfaction. Mom dragged me out to one of the social events on Saturday afternoon, a community fundraiser for a family raising money to cover the copay of a huge medical bill from their daughter's treatment. There, I was introduced to Dr. Tamar Braden, their doctor. I called our accountant and asked for his approval to donate the $50,000 needed to cover the debt. Since the girl's current treatments were over and she was cured, it took him an hour to write out the check, take it to hospital billings, and have it directly applied to their bill. Tom and I were both going through divorces, so we had something to relate to. We found that both of us had been cheated on. She had not had any children yet, but didn't seem surprised when I mentioned mine were teenagers. I figured she was around 32. When he brought me the receipt showing the bill paid in full, I took it and went to the center of the room. After getting everyone's attention, I said to the Johnston family that I would like to present them with this receipt that shows their bill is paid in full. Parish Electrical heard of their plight and has covered it on their behalf. The organization hopes it never comes back again. Tamara came over to me and whispered that she was so impressed she wanted to take me home for dinner. I laughed and said she would have to drive me home afterward because I came here with my mother and she was my ride. Tamara laughed and said she couldn't be serious. I pointed out my mother, who was bursting with pride. Tamara recognized her as one of their greatest contributors. I mentioned that our company was named after her. Tamara smiled and asked, "What was wrong with the woman who was divorcing me?" I said, "Sad because they're both going down because of it. Hopefully we made it." "Sorry we were so late," Ted's wife said as she walked towards us. "I've got great news. If you want me to start early, I can. I'm not going back with Ted. The kids and I are staying here." "James, what are you doing here?" Jackie asked. "What are you doing here?" Jackie asked. "I was just talking to Tamara," I said. "My mother's just over there watching me like a hawk." "How do you know?" Jackie asked. "He's divorcing my sister-in-law," Jackie said, "and he's going to be Ted's new boss. He gave us a great deal on his old house." "Why?" Tamara asked. "No matter what Ted's sister did," I said, "Ted will always be family. If you need any furniture, Tamara said. I have some you can have. The only thing that didn't come with the house was furniture for the kids' bedrooms. Ted's parents bought that this morning for us after the sale was confirmed, Jackie said. When Beth signed the agreement, Ted and I let the ladies talk and walked off. Beth and I talked for a few, he said. She's hurting big time. She's suffering from depression. I told her that she did it to herself, but everyone else is hurting too, even your daughters, because nobody can understand why you did it, not even you, Ted. She doesn't know it's going to get worse for her before it starts to get better. A little advice, take it easy with Tamara. She's a beautiful woman who is hurting as much as you, Ted said. She is and has always been a keeper. Tamara came and took my hand. Let's go. I promised you dinner and we're going to have to go shopping to pick up a few things. Mom watched us head out. Tamara handed me the keys and asked me to drive her over to Food City, a small independent grocery store known for having the best selection of meat in the area. She offered to let me wait, but I said no, so we went in together. What's on the menu? I asked. Steak cooked on a grill, a tossed salad, and if you have room, dessert, Tamara said. If that's okay, I replied. Sounds good. We'd best pick up a couple of bottles of red wine to go with it. It was after midnight before I got back home. Tamara and I had a wonderful evening together. We agreed to get together the following Saturday. For some reason, I had the best night's sleep since Beth walked out of our marriage. Mom dragged me to church on Sunday. Connie had finally found and put in an offer on the house she wanted. I told her to submit a copy of the purchase agreement to accounting if it was agreed to so they could issue the check. The girls met their mother at the mall for lunch. They told me afterward that it did not go well. First, they had revealed that I had met someone and hoped the lady would help me start healing. My mother had called them and informed them about my first aid. They then told her what they had found on John's computer. It was the first time Beth had heard about it. Beth was devastated because she knew she had lost the chance for sole custody of our daughters. The girls believed their mother was going through depression. Meanwhile, the district attorney had just finished laying multiple charges of statutory assault against my brother. He apparently told the parents of John's previous victims that John had just moved a woman into his house who had 2 minor daughters that suited his taste. Most of them agreed to lay charges to protect those innocent girls. They arrested him the next day at his home in front of Beth. The moment they took him into custody, Beth realized that she would never be allowed custody of her children. What her divorce lawyer had written up in the original divorce petition was coming true. Not for James, but for her, because she had allowed herself to be taken down by someone who was the complete opposite of James. It had been just over 2 months since Tamara and I had met. John was out on bail. Beth and my divorce lawyers had worked out all monetary details. She would get $4 million, and that was it. She would not get any of my shares. The DNA test had confirmed that Boo and Bree were my biological daughters, and even Beth seemed relieved. We had agreed that I would get sole custody, but Beth would be allowed liberal visitation and access as long as it was not in John's presence. Beth had fought us on it during mediation, but I pointed out that the only reason John wanted her to move in was so that he could have liberal access to my daughters. Hearing that broke Beth because she had to face the fact that what I threatened to claim might be true. The amount of money I was giving her, if invested properly, would allow Beth some quality of life if John did indeed have to do time. I provided her with the names of 2 investment advisors she should work with. When the divorce was finalized, Connie and Tom had moved back with their brood of 5. Much to my mother's delight. She was getting to know Connie's children intimately, and for her that was truly a blessing. Mom said her life had been filled with more love than what she had lost. I could see the truth in that comment. My mother, my sister, and I decided that Connie would remain CEO, much to Tom's delight. John's reputation had been totally destroyed. Even those he had called lifelong friends had turned against him. His legal bills were mounting. My daughters believed that as soon as their mothers and my divorce was final, their mother would dump him. The cost of having a real relationship with him had ended up being too great for her, and she was concerned about her mother's depressed state. The takeover was moving ahead quite well. The contracts that had fallen behind because of the bankruptcy had been caught up to date and were now ahead of schedule. Most would end up coming in way under the agreed price. We had decided to rebate them all 10% after the final payment had been received. We had cut the projected cost of labor and related costs by 50% since taking them over. I had flown out to see some of the changes being made in some of the new buildings and land we had become owners of. The excess had been put up for sale at their appraised value. Human Resources, working with the former employees, had arranged so that more than half of them had become contractors working out of our new retail locations. We had given them loans to buy the trucks and equipment they needed from us at wholesale prices. Part of the package set up with them included the accounting program from QuickBooks. Ted, with his skillful negotiations and due to the increase in volume, had cut the cost per item by 20%. He had started reorganizing our whole approach, which would significantly reduce our handling costs when fully completed. He was proving that I had made the right choice. Jackie and he were thrilled with their new home, making decoration changes to make it their own. The upper management team was excited because, by the time it was completed, the allowances we had for costs and losses had been reduced by 2/3. We had learned that those at the Capitol had wanted the bankruptcy handled as quickly and quietly as possible, which supported our thoughts that there had been major paybacks for some of those contracts. We had been the first and only offer, and we figured those in power wanted to ensure certain things remained hidden. Tom had hired his old firm to provide a new appraisal value due to our significant growth. Mom and I were preparing for a big barbecue at her place this Saturday. I was a bundle of nerves because most would be meeting tomorrow for the first time. The whole management team and their families would be there, along with all of Beth's and my family. I slipped away to pick up Tamara because I wanted her to meet my daughters before the rest of the crowd arrived. Even though it was a casual affair, Tamara had decided to wear a dress that complemented her figure. She looked stunning with her red hair let down, wearing white with hand-stitched embroidery of monarch butterflies going down the side. Tamara was 5 feet 8 inches and weighed less than 120 pounds, but she was full of energy. We shared a few affectionate kisses before heading out. We entered the backyard of my mother's house together holding hands. Boo and Bree came right over. Tamara must have sensed my nervousness because she said, "Relax." After introductions, Boo said to her, "If you're my dad's girlfriend, he sure picked a good one." I could see the change in Tamara right away. I leaned in and whispered, "You were as nervous as I was." Tamara acknowledged that she was. The party turned out to be a great success. Between my two mothers, my sister, and my daughters, they soon had Tamara fitting in as if she had been part of the group all along. Tamara ended up learning more about me than I was ready for her to know. When Ted and I were getting a cold beverage, he said, "It looks like the two of you are starting to fall in love. Mom and Dad are going to babysit for us. So how about we go to a restaurant and go dancing?" "Sounds good to me," I said. David and I had a brief moment, and he told me that he thought John was going down for at least 7 years because of the number of parents standing up against him. Joan thought that tomorrow was the best thing that had come into my life for a long time, but was worried that I might mess it up. David said, "Why do women always think it's the man's fault?" Mom had opened up the pool, so Tamara and I were sitting in lounge chairs, watching those who decided to swim. I didn't like how much skin my daughter's bathing suits were showing. "It must have been showing," Tamara said. "You really are just old-fashioned in your values. Was your father that way?" I thought about it for a moment before saying, "Yeah, I guess he really was. He wanted us to be the best we could be and always stressed that how we walked, talked, and conducted ourselves said more about us than our own words could. Sadly, that's what drove Beth to do what she did. If my first husband was like you, we would have still been married," Tamara said. We looked at each other without saying a word before sharing a long, affectionate kiss. I think we both realized that our relationship had become serious. Bree, sticking her head out of the water, said teasingly, "Cool it, Dad. She's not our new mother yet." Having broken the mood, I took off my socks and shoes, made sure my keys and wallet were hidden in them, then ran into the pool to get her. Tamara watched as I played with my daughters for about an hour before getting out to change. When I returned, the 3 of them were having a good chat. Both girls then took multiple pictures with their phones, which they mistakenly sent to their mother, letting her know it was serious. The food the staff had prepared was exceptional. Tamara found it interesting that I went into the kitchen to thank them for how well they had done. It was noticed by all that we were never apart. We met Ted and Jackie at the Irish restaurant and bar. Tamara was the client of the owner's wife. We danced until closing and I really enjoyed myself. I walked Tamara to her front door and was invited in. Tamara and I stopped at the house so I could change and then went out shopping before Mom and the girls got back from church. We were all expected at Mom's for Sunday night family dinner. Everyone was wondering where I was. In frustration, my daughter texted me asking where I was and when I would arrive. About 2 minutes later, Tamara and I walked in the door. You said, "It's about time, dinner's almost ready. You've got some explaining to do, Dad, because you didn't come home last night." I couldn't help but break out in a big grin that got my sister and my mother's attention. I asked the staff to bring in 2 bottles of champagne and glasses for everybody. Tamara had her hands behind her back and my mother caught on, a big smile spreading across her face. When we had all been served, I said, "Tamara and I got engaged this afternoon." That's when it became a lively scene at Mom's place. Tamara proudly showed everyone her diamond ring. Bree had recorded my announcement and sent a copy to her mom. That night, my mother took an overdose of sleeping pills and went to bed. She couldn't cope with me moving on with my life. She never woke up. We later learned that John and Beth were blaming each other for the problems they were experiencing. Both realized that what they had was not love but lust, and they had confused themselves because of that. Everyone was deeply affected by her passing. John and I stood by Beth's grave, sharing a few final words. He said, "I'm sorry for everything." I told him I didn't believe him because he couldn't specify what he was sorry about and walked away. That night, John took out his favorite possession, the first gun our father had bought him. After drinking a large amount of alcohol, he placed the barrel below his chin and pulled the trigger. On the table beside him, he had written 2 words, "I'm sorry." It was a week before the Labor Day weekend when I was sitting in my office reviewing a few things. Carl, Tom, Mary, Joanne, and Lucy came in carrying a huge cake, glasses, and champagne. I looked up and asked, "What's the celebration for?" "We paid off the loan in full," Tom said. "For the huge expansion, we are again debt-free." "Thank God," I said. "I never want another 6 months like the last 6 ever again." "It wasn't all bad," Tom said. "I'm looking forward to becoming your best man in 8 days." Everybody laughed because they all knew that tomorrow was 2 months along.